this. So this is in a way is an endpoint. You can see this, right? So this is a URL, right? Now here you can see search /search, right? So this is something that we call resource folder. So under after a URL, there could be resource folder, there could be version, there could be different things, right? Every time you see a question mark here, now you know this quality assurance is something that we just tested, tried, right? So this is data, right? After question mark, all the thing that you see is data. It also saying I'm just testing it from Chrome and all those. So let's forget about this part for now. Okay. You'll see it actually has these few parts. So this is something that we call an endpoint, right? So what is an endpoint? It has an URL, right? The first one is URL. Then the second one is a resource folder. We call it a resource folder. Right? They may have, Google may have something that they're testing internally. They may say search v2, version 2. They may say search v3, right? We do not know. Right? This is our production server. So they may have different resource folder. And every time you see the question mark, right? Question mark, after question mark, this is data. Q is the parameter, is the parameter name. Right? And you'll see quality assurance is something that I just search. The reason they put a plus sign in the middle, because I put quality space assurance, right? They're just adding this to value in there. Okay? So this is something that we call endpoint. Okay? So what is endpoint is? So endpoint or URI, endpoint URI is what? Unified Resource Indicator, right? Fine.
What? URI?
URI?
I forgot.
Anybody Google search what is URI? I always forget this.
URI or URL?
URL, I think.
URI. Uniform Resource Identifier. That's URI, right? URL is Uniform Resource Locator.
Locator, URL.
Okay? URI is Uniform Resource Identifier. To make it nicer, we call it endpoint because that's what we are trying to hit, right? So what is an URI or endpoint? Sometime interview question. What is an URI? What is an endpoint? What does an endpoint consist of? What does an endpoint consist of? It has an URL, like you can see www.google.com, that's the URL, and then you'll have a resource folder, and then you're going to have parameter, right? And that parameter, that's when it starts with a question mark. So as soon as it starts a question mark, you know it's a data. So you know what we're going to test? We are going to test this, okay? And you will see, I'm going to show you some of the URI, okay? So this is what is test data is. I'm sorry. This is what is endpoint that we're going to test. There are many, many different endpoints. Now, how this communication works? How do we test this? How the API kind of works? Okay. That's good so far. This is what we're going to test. So you're not going to test yahoo.com where the buttons are there, links are there, and all those. It's going to look like something like this, and we're going to see some of those today.
So resource folder is the search. That's the resource folder.
Yeah, that could be search v2, search v3, right? Internally, it could have a different version and everything. So we want to, mark that up.
Question mark is the parameter.
After question mark, like Q is the parameter. Like today, when you remember when we were doing inspect, that was the name, right? That is the parameter is getting.
So what's the question? The question mark.
Oh, this is the, I'm just saying, after the question mark, the parameter starts.
Does question mark stand for anything, or it's just asking?
Yeah, it's basically that after, when you see question mark, after that, those are all data plugged in. But this is what is endpoint consists of.
Sure.
URL plus resource folder plus parameters. Now, when we did not have any API, right, we used to do database testing like we did the other time, right? You go to the database, you do a query and all those things. These days, sometimes for the database testing, we also do through API. The API, the purpose of API is basically data manipulation, or mostly data manipulation. That we can add a data, we can update data, we can delete data, all those data manipulation that we can do. That is done through API level. Like if you look at the image that I attached to the class note, you can think about that as a microservice architecture. This one, right? So look at here. Why API testing is or this microservice architecture is so important? Look, every application has multiple interfaces, right? When I'm saying interfaces, I'm talking about that application is accessible from mobile app. That application is accessible from the browser, right? You can go online, like think about bankofamerica.com. You can do it with a mobile app. You can go to bankofamerica.com. You can possibly go to a ATM machine. So everything is pointing to the same spot, right? Doesn't matter how you do it, right? It's all connecting with that account DB or inventory DB or this kind of thing. So if you look at it here, so this is an online store, right? So this online store has account service, inventory service, shipping service, right? And they have different database integrated. Now, how each of those databases is talking to each other is by the REST API. It's updating, modifying, deleting data through API.
So is the API closely related to mostly to databases?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what we do pretty much with API. It's
Mhm.
Like it
Just
is
the
connected
database.
to the database, right?
Yeah. And the importance of API becomes American Airlines is not going to give somebody direct access to their database. But you go to the database, you can hack the data, you can delete the data, what's going to happen, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where the API is playing a great role, because you will see the API, they have an API gateway. So that's where all the authorization, authentication, all those, hacking proven things kind of in place, right? We are going to give people access, but at the same time, we have to make sure nobody is trying to, destroy
manipulate
that
the data,
database.
yeah.
Right? So it's become a lot more sensitive, right? So as you can see here, the browser has front end store, the mobile app has it, but it's all going through the API gateway and kind of connecting with the different database, right? So all this, so here, this store can only access the APIs. It cannot directly go to the database. It goes through the API, right? Same thing from the mobile part of it, right? So somebody's going through mobile, they're going through the REST API, and that's how they're accessing it. And it will make sense to you in a second when we look at some of this functionality that API does, right? But if we are thinking about, more like a high level, say for example, we're in Priceline here, right? So this is Priceline, right? Say from individual computer, if we connect through our browser, right? If we go to Priceline.com and you offer a search, say for example, I'm going to fly from JFK to San Francisco, say November 7, 2021, returning November 21, 2021, right? And the number of passengers, 2 passengers, okay? Now we're doing all those search, all those data search in here. Right? These are our data. Now what Priceline is going to do, Priceline has API access to American Airlines. Right? Priceline has API access to Delta. Right? And they have their database, right? They have their database hooked up in here. Because that database, this is the back end, right? This is an individual unit. Now, what we have here is, what Priceline is going to do, they're going to send request, right? So they are going to send request to those application, right? So here there are going to be authentication, authorization. This is, think about, these are the API gateway, right? So it's going to go through the authorization, but Priceline has to send a request. And how Priceline sends a request? By using the endpoints. It sends the endpoints. And this request goes through HTTP protocol. It could go through HTTP or HTTPS protocol, right? Now we know what is HTTP is, right?
Yeah.
Hypertext Terminal Protocol, something like that, right? So what it does is, if you have internet connection, right? If you are online, you can send the request, right? And you will see today we're going to use some of those API service provided, and we're going to send requests to them.